I love bread, especially fresh baked bread. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the science of bread. Here you can see some bread that I baked at home, and that my kids and I are going to teach you how to make later in the video. See all the air bubbles in it? That air helps make bread fluffy and delicious. When we bake bread, those bubbles are made by a gas called carbon dioxide, which you might have heard of before. But where does the carbon dioxide come from, and how does it get into the bread? We can thank a tiny, amazing organism called yeast. Here you can see some yeast viewed through a microscope. Yeast cells are way too small to see with just our eye. They are so small that you could fit 250 of them side by side in just 1 millimeter. Just to give you an idea of how small that is, imagine a dime, which measures about 18 millimeters across. In this picture, I want you to focus on the space between two of the smallest lines on the ruler. That distance is 1 millimeter. In that space, 250 yeast cells could be lined up next to each other. That's how small they are. Even though they are small though, they do a big job. When we mix yeast with flour, it starts to eat the sugars that are in the flour. As it eats that sugar, it starts to make carbon dioxide. In this picture, you can see a cartoon yeast cell eating sugar and farting out carbon dioxide. Those farts are what make bread dough rise and give bread all those bubbles. So here you can see bread before and after rising. When you bake bread in an oven, all the yeast cells get killed by the heat, but the bubbles remain. Next, my kids and I are going to show the first steps for making bread. This is a really easy bread recipe that just takes 4 ingredients and some time. We're going to start the recipe today, get the yeast going, and then tomorrow we'll come back and get the dough ready for baking. If you don't have yeast at home, don't worry. You can just watch the videos for now. Later I'll show you how to make a kind of bread called bannock that doesn't need yeast. Okay, welcome everybody. We are going to be making bread today. And I have my helpers, my son Max and my daughter Nora, and they're going to be helping me put all the ingredients together. So this recipe we're going to do, it takes a little while. So there's not much mixing to do, but when we mix up everything today, then we're going to let it sit. We're going to let the yeast do what it has to do. And I'm going to tell you more about yeast in the video that I'm putting together for you, so you'll get to learn more about yeast there. So we get to see yeast in action. We're going to be making some bread. Now, yeast, you might have at home. Sometimes it comes in jars that look like this here. We're going to be using just instant yeast, dry instant yeast. But these days, while everyone's at home, a lot of people are doing baking, and so it's gotten really hard to find yeast. So if you have some yeast at home, that's great. If you don't worry about it. Please don't worry about going out of the house to get yeast. It's actually really hard to find, and I don't want you trying to find ingredients that you don't have. So if you don't have any yeast, that's cool. Just watch the video, and then I'll try to put another recipe up for you guys to try if you don't have any yeast. But this one we're going to try with yeast, so we can see yeast in action. Yeast is really cool, and let's get down to the recipe. You can learn more about yeast in the video. So for this activity, we will need, you'll need a bowl. You'll need a measuring cup, some measuring spoons, some water, yes, some salt, and some yeast. And flour, right, can't forget the flour. So let's go through the steps here of what I've already measured out the flour. So we did 3.5 cups of flour. I've already put that in the bowl here. So we've got 3.5 cups of flour in there. And then what we're gonna do first is we are going to add some salts. Okay, so this part here, I'm just gonna get something to pour over. I'll be right back with, so. Here, okay, so how about Nora, can you hold? We're gonna do 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So this is, we're just gonna be doing 1 teaspoon here. So I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it says 1 teaspoon. Anyway, you'll trust me, that says 1 teaspoon. So Nora, can you hold 1 teaspoon over that? And I'm gonna pour the salt in here.
That's a lot of salt.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna scrape it off. So when we're measuring dry goods like this, we just level it off. If you have a knife or something, you can use a knife. I'm just using this for now. Okay, and then Nora's gonna dump that in there. That's 1 teaspoon. And then Max, can you hold it? We need to do another half teaspoon. Actually, salt makes it taste really good. Okay, so Max, can you hold that? Just hold it safely over there. I'm gonna pour.
Are we allowed to ask questions about the baking?
Yes, you can. I'm just gonna get this measured and ask some questions. Okay, and then Max, wait, I'm just gonna level that off.
And then after that, the salt poisoning.
Okay, so Max, can you dump that? No, not in there. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, so don't dump it in there. It's gonna go in our bowl. I'm just gonna level it off again. Okay, dump that in here, Max. There you go. All the way in. There we go. Okay, thank you. Good job. Okay, so we got our
Can I
salt.
ask you something?
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. Quick questions.
Didn't they already know that you needed to use yeast?
Oh, yeah, they probably already knew because I'm doing lots of
Then why
videos.
did you tell them that you needed to
Oh,
use
it's okay.
yeast?
Yeah, so because well, it's really these days it's hard to get yeast because everyone's buying up all the yeast. So some people don't have yeast at home. So that's why I talked about yeast a little bit. Okay, Nora, did you have a question?
Yes. Why do you want to put salt in it? Won't that just make it taste all salty?
Well, salt actually adds flavor to a lot of foods. If you put too much salt in it, you're right, it will taste really salty.
That's a lot of salt.
But actually, for the amount of bread we're making, it's not that bad. Okay, so next thing we're going to add is the yeast. So now the recipe calls for half a teaspoon of instant dry yeast. So I'm going to get half a teaspoon here. Okay, so you can see the yeast will look like this. There we go. Okay, so that's our instant dry yeast. I'm just going to add that in. Now, my yeast is really old. It's some of the yeast is a little bit slow to work, so I'm just going to add a little bit extra. But if you have fresher yeast, just go with half a teaspoon. I'm just going to add a little bit extra, just because my yeast is old.
And it has bugs.
No, the yeast doesn't have any bugs. Okay. Well, the yeast is sort of bugs in a way. Yeah, yeast is really cool. Yeast is a live organism that's going to produce the carbon dioxide that's going to make our bread rise. And there's more about that in the video. But for now, we are going to, yes, so we will be stirring this up. So Nora, can you give that a stir? Let me just move the video over here so you can see what's happening. So Nora is stirring up our yeast and our salt and our flour. So we're just going to mix that up. This recipe only has a few ingredients. It really just has 4 ingredients. So we've got 3 of them already. We've got our flour, our yeast, and our salts all in there. Okay, so next what we're going to do...
Unless you call time an ingredient.
It does take a little time, you're right. Actually, it takes quite a bit of time because we're going to have to let it rise for a long time. So
Can I pull?
no, not yet. We have to measure first. We don't want to pour. So we need 1 3/4 cups of water. Okay, so let me just show you on here what we're going to be... Oh, please don't pour that in, Max. Okay. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that on here. We need, okay, it's really hard to show you on here, but we're gonna go to 1 3/4 cups. And so do you guys see here? Here's 1 cup, 1 1/2 cups, and there's 1 3/4 cups. Okay, so we need to pour it to there. So maybe I'll just do this part here, and then you guys can check for me that I poured it right. And then you can pour it in, Max, into the bowl. Okay.
We want it at the 2, 3.
So that's right. We wanted 1. Oh, sorry. We wanted the 3/4. So 1 3/4.
So here. Okay.
So
Let's check
I'm
to
just gonna
make
turn
sure.
around so you guys can see. You can tell me if you think it's at 1 3/4.
Stop bouncing water. Max, no! You're making it bounce again.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty close.
A little over, Dad.
Well,
a little
actually,
over.
it's the tiniest bit over, but the meniscus, the bottom of that water, is what we want to be at the 3/4 mark. So it's pretty close. I'd say it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we pour it in, we have to be super careful. We don't want to spill any.
Max,
Here, hold on, Max.
No,
hold
no,
on.
no,
hold on.
Dad's doing that.
No, it's okay. I said Max can pour it in. We just have to do it really carefully. Okay. So.
You move it closer.
Okay. Hold it over the bowl, and then just pour it slowly in. Whoop, and yeah, make sure it goes in the bowl. That's it. Good job, Max.
Now it's looking a little bit like pancake batter.
Okay.
Can I stir?
So I'm just gonna get it started.
I
You
can
each get a turn to stir. We just don't. I don't want it to spill out.
It's looking like pancake batter a little
Okay,
bit.
Nora, you take a bit of a stir, and then Max can do a bit of a stir.
Dad, it's looking like a little bit of pancake
Yeah.
batter.
Yeah, it does. It's gonna be quite a wet dough to start, and it's gonna look a little rough. We don't have to mix it too much. We're just gonna make sure we get everything mixed up.
It's like it's a little like slime.
Do you want to give it a mix, Max?
Max, it's like hard slime or oofla.
Kind of like oobleck?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll hold it, Max, so you stir.
because it's all liquidy when you don't.
this is gonna be for my class. Yeah. So hopefully my
It kind of smells like
oh,
wood.
we did do black.
It kind of smells like wood.
Yeah.
It smells so
We can brush it off there. Okay, I'm just gonna do the last bit of stirring. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna do the last bit of stirring now. What you want is you just want to make sure you get all that flour stirred in,
Our black is ready.
and it's gonna be quite a wet dough. You don't need to mix it really well. Just make sure you get kind of a wet, shaggy
Oh,
dough.
I wish we could make it look like cake. Like put it in a cake pan.
Okay,
I can't eat it.
and I think we're almost done there. So we're pretty much done the first step of our recipe. I'm just gonna get a knife
The
to scrape that
second
off.
step is 2 hours of waiting and waiting and waiting. The boring step.
So
Waiting.
I'll just give you a closer look at the shaggy dough here that we've done.
Shaggy.
Now, we're gonna let the yeast, those cells in there, we put in half a teaspoon of yeast. Half a teaspoon of yeast is actually about 20 billion cells of yeast.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Can we try that?
No.
Oh, why?
It wouldn't taste very good. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you a closer look at what this looks like. So there's what your dough might look. Now, what we're gonna do, the last step is we're just gonna cover it. I'm gonna get some saran wrap, we'll cover it. You can use a tea towel if you like. And we're gonna let it sit for a while. So you wanna let it sit for actually at least 8 hours. But you can let it sit for like up to 12 hours, even 18 hours.
But you can let it sit for 8.
We'll probably let it sit overnight actually. And then you'll notice that it starts to form bubbles, it gets much bigger because the yeast are gonna be doing its work. And so we're gonna check back tomorrow to see what our dough looks like. Okay, but I'm just gonna quickly cover it first. Okay, can you guys, you're still on video, guys. I'm just gonna get some saran wrap, I'll be right back, I'm gonna cover this up, okay? Okay, so I'm just getting some saran wrap. You can use anything. You can use tinfoil if that's what you got. You can use a towel.
We have saran wrap and tinfoil.
I'm just gonna cover that up.
But this works because you can
Okay,
see it.
so that's really all the mixing we need to do. Tomorrow we're gonna do a few more things before we put it in the oven to bake.
This is the most boring step. Waiting.
But it's kind of fun because you get to watch it grow. Okay, so it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take quite a few hours, but that's why we're doing
No,
this
you said
over
at night.
Well, we're gonna leave it overnight. That's right. So you can leave this overnight, and we're gonna come back tomorrow and show you the second step about baking it. We're gonna let it rise again a second time, but not for nearly as long. Okay, so hope it works. Have fun and contact me if you have any questions. Can you guys say bye?
Bye.